Hey guys, today I'm going to be doing a review on the TV series, The Decameron. So, before I head into my thoughts and feelings on the Netflix TV series, The Decameron, just a quick disclaimer, I don't plan on having any sort of spoilers in this particular video. There's a lot of interesting things that happen in this show that, the less you know, the better, I think. That being said though, in the comments down below, if you want to talk about all things spoilers with me, feel free to. So let's get going. As I said, this TV show, The Decameron, it is a Netflix TV series. It had 8 episodes. So before I head into what the actual plot synopsis of the TV series is about, it is very loosely, very loosely based on the short story collection under the same name, The Decameron, by Boccaccio. And it was published back in sometime in the 1300s or 1400s, something like that. And yeah, it's about a group of characters who spend their time at a nice location where they're trying to avoid the Black Death. And yeah, the Black Death going on across Europe, where tons of people were dying left and right, and you pretty much couldn't avoid it. It didn't matter if you were rich, poor, man, woman, child, old, young, it didn't matter. The Black Death was coming after you. And yeah, these characters just spend their time in this short story collection telling tales. It's kind of like a 1001 Nights, you know? It's kind of like the Canterbury Tales, for instance, you know? Groups of characters just telling little short vignettes, if you will, that kind of relate to something within the world, you know? So, as I said, the original Decameron is this show is very loosely based on that. And to my understanding, when I was kind of looking at some quick research with the original story, many of the character names in the TV series, many of the character names do come from the original short story collection, because I was scrolling through some of them and I was like, oh, I recognize that name. That name was in the TV show. And in its own way, by the time you reach the very last episode of the TV series does pay homage to the original short story collection, because right at the very end, the characters, without spoiling anything obviously, but the characters do have a moment where they are telling some stories to kind of while away the time. So yeah, the show, like I said, very highly loosely based on the original Decameron, but it does have those little small moments that it plays homage to the original in a fun little way. And you guys, I did major in English back when I was in college, and I took a world literature class, and one of our required readings was reading a couple of the short stories from the Decameron. And you know what, guys, I'm a terrible English major, because I remember reading those stories and I do remember actually really enjoying them and finding them genuinely hilarious, but then I never went back and read the entire thing. Like I said, it's 100 stories, so I did. I never got to finish reading the whole thing. You guys, I feel like after watching the show, I need to go remedy that. So the actual Netflix TV series, yeah guys, as I said, it's on Netflix, 8 episodes, and it is set in 1348 during the Black Death in Italy, following a group of nobles and their servants who spend the time at a villa where they revel in gluttony, greed, and lust. And boy, oh boy, does it get wild and crazy. And you guys, I found this show to be a pleasant surprise, and I feel like I'm in the minority on that, because I got on IMDb to just look at the cast list and stuff like that, and the overall general rating for this show is at a 5.4 at the moment. And I was a little scandalized by that. This show is certainly not perfect. It has its fair share of flaws, but I don't think it was that bad to be a 5.4 whatsoever. Like I said, I was genuinely pleasantly surprised with this show, and the humor for me worked. Yes, not all of the humor flies and catches well, but for the most part, I liked the humor. I don't know if it's just me being someone, I'm such a history nerd. You know, I am such a history nerd. So I don't know if it's kind of that sort of thing, like the history angle of this show and like the historical type humor, the medieval humor, you know. I don't know if it's just, I was vibing with it maybe more than other people were. I don't know. And yes, sometimes things are perhaps a little bit too modern within the humor, but that didn't particularly bother me. So I guess what I'm trying to say, the humor of this show is not going to be for everybody. And like I said with the plot synopsis, all of these characters, they are reveling in gluttony, greed, and lust. So a lot of your humor is playing within that, within this idea of gluttony, within this idea of characters being ambitious and power hungry and very, very greedy and very vain and shallow. And yeah, characters, there is just all sorts of lust running rampant. People, characters on this show are very sex crazed. And I do mean sex crazed. Like, there's some great moments that I found particularly hilarious. One of the best looking guys on the show, he sits and takes off his shirt. His shirt constantly comes off every single damn episode, you guys. I kid you not. His shirt's coming off, and you have like a woman staring at him, you have a guy staring at him. Like, everybody's in love with this guy when he takes his shirt off, okay? So, I mean, it's that type of show, you know? So, yeah, the humor, it's very raunchy for the most part. I think the humor is very raunchy. So if that's not going to float your boat, you may not like it. And before I forget, because while I'm thinking about it, the opening credits of this show, you guys, I loved it. Like where the cast credits are rolling. It's just like an animated opening credit, and it's just a bunch of rats doing various different things, and like the rats form different like shapes, like they form a cross, or they form a skull, or they form a like a cup or something, you know. Like the rats are like swarming all over the opening credits, and I got a kick out of the opening credits. I thought they were really cute and hilarious. So what is this show exploring? Even though it is a comedy for the most part, the show is exploring some really interesting issues, I think, especially in the second half of the season, most particularly, because like I said, it's 8 episodes. I think the first 4 episodes, that really digs into the raunchy humor and how despicable and despisable these characters are. But the second half of the season, I think that's where the humor is still definitely there, but things definitely start to get a lot more serious and urgent, and characters are definitely being much more reflective about themselves and their relationships. So there's definitely a big tone shift, I think, in the second half, and I think the second half is what really worked for me the most. So what this show is exploring, it does have some depth and nuance within the insanity of the humor, and it's definitely exploring this whole notion of power balance between the classes. Again, this is taking place in 1348 Italy, and again, it's about nobles and their servants going to a villa to try and outrun the Black Death. It's very much like The Mask of the Red Death by Edgar Allan Poe, and I think we all know how that ends. It doesn't end well for the nobles, you know? So this show is definitely exploring the power struggles, the power dynamics between the nobles and their servants, and how the nobles, they're just absolutely despicable, horrible people, how they manipulate and control their servants, and yeah, the servants being just really absolutely powerless to do much of anything. And again, the Black Death, as I mentioned, the Black Death, it didn't matter who you were. If you were rich, being rich wasn't going to protect you from the Black Death. But that's part of what the show is about. It's about these characters thinking they can outrun and outbeat the Black Death by holding up at this fancy villa. The show definitely also explores sexism. Again, it's the medieval era. There's a lot of sexism running rampant. Yeah, definitely medieval culture, obviously. I got a kick out of like some of the little medieval jokes in the show. It definitely explores love in its own way, in some interesting ways, because many of these characters are searching and craving love, but that's kind of the question, do some of them even deserve love? Will they find love in unexpected places? And of course, the Black Death. This show is very much obviously about death at its core. And it does a lot of interesting things with death in this show, you know, poking fun at death, trying to make light of death at times. But there are those kind of softer, slower moments where the characters do get reflective about death and what has their lives been all about. You know, life is fleeting. Have they even done anything with their lives? And yeah, a lot of characters being kind of comfortable with the facts. You know what, we're all gonna die one day. We might as well live the best that we can with the time that we have, you know. So yeah, death is definitely a huge pivotal part of this show for sure. And without spoiling anything, once again, characters are going to die. The Black Death, characters will die at some point. You definitely need to be aware of that. It's just kind of a thing of who will die and how will they die. And like I already said, the characters on this show, I think it's going to be very difficult to have like a favorite character on this show. Because for me, I definitely have the characters that I kind of gravitated more towards, that I liked. But yeah, I feel like you're not really going to necessarily have like a favorite character, because for the most part, these characters are terrible, and they are deliberately meant to be terrible people. Many of these characters, they're cruel, they're vain, they're selfish, they're shallow, they're greedy, they're ambitious. The list goes on and on and on. All of these very undesirable traits, and all these characters exhibit these traits in some form or fashion. And that's what these characters have to reconcile with, especially in the second half of the season. These characters, as things start getting really chaotic and wild and crazy and desperate, these characters really have to reconcile and reflect with who they are, you know, the cold hard truths of who they are. And are they comfortable with that? Are they comfortable knowing that they're going to die without maybe having grown or developed, you know? And some characters are able to grow and develop, and some are kind of static, and they're deliberately going to remain static, you know? So yeah, they have to be really reflective on themselves, their pasts, their future, if they even have a future, and yeah, just their core relationships. They're very reflective of their relationships and how they got those relationships, and do they deserve those relationships. I do think what a big fail of this show is, the episodes are about an hour long. Most episodes run about anywhere from about 48 to 55 minutes, if not exactly an hour. And I do think the big negative for me is that the show, I think the episodes were too long. Because when I first heard that this show was going to be a comedy, I kind of went into it expecting the episodes were going to be like maybe 30, 35, maybe 40 minutes at the most. So I was really shocked that the episodes were like an hour apiece. So I feel like the show could, I honestly feel like the show could have benefited from being shorter, you know, at least maybe like 40 minutes or so. Because, I mean, you do have a lot of characters that you gotta get through, and they all need their screen time, obviously, and there is quite a bit of story. But I do think sometimes the humor, because the episodes are so long, sometimes the humor can almost feel a little over lengthy and kind of drawn out. You know, like a particular joke might be kind of just overly lengthy and drawn out. It's overstaying its welcome. You know, the humor can kind of overstay its welcome at times. So for me, a definite negative is the episode length time. I think it could have benefited from being a little bit shorter and still kind of getting across what it needed to get across, you know, just be a little tighter and a little bit more focused, because definitely it kind of reaches a point in the season, it does feel almost a little too long on occasion. And I haven't mentioned like the costuming and acting on the show. I think for the most part, I really enjoyed the costuming and the acting. The costuming and the acting in particular are very over the top, and they're very flamboyant. And again, the costuming may not work for some people, because I think there is definitely some historical inaccuracies within the costuming. But again, the costuming is very reflective of the types of characters, the type of despicable characters some of these characters are. So it's meant to be over the top and really flamboyant. And yet, even the acting, like I said, is really flamboyant and over the top. But it still kind of works in kind of the frame of what's going on. The show is still fun. You know, I had a fun time with it, and it's entertaining. And that's all I ask for. As long as I'm entertained, that's great. Because, as I said, the show definitely has a lot of flaws to it, but I still had a lot of fun with it. And this is most certainly going to be a one and done season. Have no fear of another season. If for whatever reason they try to push another season out of this, I will not understand why, because this show is definitely, it's one and done, and that's it. It tells a complete full story. That being said, if Netflix wants to do something else similar to this, I would totally be here if they did like the Canterbury Tales, you guys. I have read, very much like the Decameron, I have read several short stories from the Canterbury Tales, and I remember really loving them when I majored in English back in college. So I would love to see maybe an updated adaptation of the Canterbury Tales, because I want to say there was an adaptation of the Canterbury Tales that maybe the BBC did like years and years ago, but it's like really old and dated at this point. So I would love to see something updated with the Canterbury Tales, because yeah, that has some raunchy humor. So overall, I enjoyed the Decameron. Like I said, it's not perfect. There's definitely flaws, but I was entertained. I had fun. It definitely has some great things, thematic elements that it's exploring. Yeah, you're not going to like these characters. You're deliberately not meant to like these characters. Let's put it that way. And yeah, I liked it. It was fine for what it was. Just really quick to get through, I think. Not wasted time. I didn't consider it wasted time for me at all. So you guys, that is it for my thoughts and feelings on the Decameron. In the comments below, have you guys seen this TV series? Did you love it? Did you hate it? If you hated it, that's totally okay. Let me know what you did not like about it down in the comments down below. So that's it for this video. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. And if you like this video, you may like these other videos. Bye guys.